we meant to live and work? What creates home? Over the past several years, we've posed this question on Feel Like You Belong. And today, we're getting a two-generational perspective on the issue of home and belonging. Joining us in studio are Marcos and Thomas Bragança to explore identity and straddling culture. Marcos, Thomas, welcome to Feel Like You Belong.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
You bet. So we were talking earlier about how the nature of your family is very itinerant. You have moved around a lot. Can you talk about how you don't stay in one place?
Yeah, it's true. I'm actually a descendant of immigrants. My grandparents on both sides, on my father's side, came from Portugal. And my grandparents on my mother's side came from Germany and Hungary. They moved to Brazil. And I was born in Brazil, and so was my wife, also born in Brazil. And after we got married, only 2 years after we got married, not even two, we moved to the United States, where Thomas was born and our younger son was born as well. Now, my wife is also from an immigrant family. She's a Japanese descendant. So we are really a big mix, and nowadays most of our family lives abroad. I have nieces and my sister in Canada. My father lives in Canada now, and I have my brother's family in Germany, and I have a sister and her family still in Brazil.
Mm-hmm. And I think what people don't understand is we think of the United States as being a nation of immigrants, people from lots of places. But in fact, Brazil is very comparable in lots of ways.
It's true. Brazil had a lot of immigrants last century. In the previous century, many people from Europe, of course, a very large number of people from Africa. Brazil had more slaves than the United States, actually. So there was a lot of miscegenation there in Brazil. And Brazil also had a lot of immigrants early last century, started coming from Japan. São Paulo is actually the largest Japanese city outside of Japan, as far as I know. And it's just common for us in Brazil to be exposed to many different nationalities and types of international food, and especially in big cities like São Paulo.
Sure, sure. And now you've also lived in Australia for a time.
It's true, yes. After coming to the United States, we lived here for 10 years. And my company, Dow Corning Corporation, they asked me to move to Australia for about 1 year and a half. So we were in Sydney. Thomas was only 5.5 when we moved there, but he got a chance to enjoy the Sydney Olympics in the year 2000. And we lived there until late in 2001 when we came back to Midland.
Mm-hmm. So really, moving around and being in different places isn't very strange for your family.
No. We traveled quite a bit because, as I said, we still have family in Brazil. We have family in Canada now. We went to Germany a couple of times to spend time with my brother's family. Went to my niece's wedding there, and we just feel like we're a little bit of citizens of the world, even though, yeah, we are American citizens now, and of course Thomas was born here in the United States. But we always had this exposure to a lot of different cultures and a chance to travel to different places.
Sure. Now, your last name, Bragança, is that Portuguese originally?
It is Portuguese, yes.
Okay.
Bragança is a Portuguese name.
Sure. And it carries with it maybe the inconvenience of having a letter that's not on the American English keyboard.
That's true.
So
yes.
how do you deal with that little C with the little cute tail hanging down with that in your life?
Well, sometimes people have a hard time pronouncing the name, so we say, it may, for some people it is easier to say Bragança as if it was a Z sound.
Okay.
But it's more like an S sound, Bragança.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. And when you're typing it, do you go for the extra keystroke to make it look like?
I normally do,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
There are some keyboard shortcuts we can use for that.
There are.
Yeah.
But of course, then I think the typical American response is often, "Oh, just make it a C and,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
live with it."
Yeah, in fact, our passports use a C. Yeah, because legal documents will not have those characters.
Okay, good. So, Thomas, this is really interesting for you. Born here, but your parents are not necessarily speaking English at home. Your friends are at school.
Yeah.
What is that like for you growing up?
Growing up, actually, I at one point I did, since they spoke more Portuguese at home than English. I feel like I grew up knowing Portuguese a lot better than even I might now, because especially when I moved away from home and then I went to live at Grand Valley. Then I'm constantly surrounded by always people speaking English, and every time I go, when I go to visit them, I still speak Portuguese and stuff. But I really do notice a difference, and then I kind of get better at some languages, start to deteriorate a little bit more in others. But lately, more recent, I think within the past year, I've been really trying to work on my Portuguese, and I think it's been turning out well. Every time we go visit relatives.
So I was going to ask you, when you go back to Brazil to visit cousins and such, do they tease you about?
No, actually, well, like I said, more recently, they're actually surprised that my Portuguese is so good, because living away from them and just always speaking English the majority of the time, I don't get that much practice in conversation, but I'm still able, like I said, when I go visit them, I'm able to converse and do all that fairly well.
Sure. So how would you? Brazilian culture and American culture have enough differences in terms of how people relate, how people see each other, traditions and values, just the way of understanding behaviors and motives and interactions. Those kinds of things are very different. How do you feel like inside? Are you Brazilian? Are you American? Where how does that land?
I definitely feel because I've been, immersed more in American culture, but it's so one of the main things that people point out is that sometimes after say get-togethers at dinner, as Brazilians, we tend to even after we finish dinner, we'll stay at the restaurant for another hour and a half, just sitting, talking, having coffee at the table, and people sometimes point out that even after we're done with the main event, I'll always stick around for a long time after. So that's a part that's just always stuck with me, especially when like I said, we go home. It's always it's more of that Brazilian kind of get together. We eating sometimes the meal isn't even the main event. It's the talking afterwards.
The socializing.
Yeah,
the actually being together.
Yeah, very. I would say that definitely I get the more social side from Brazilian culture and being raised with my parents and whatnot. Because even my roommate actually pointed this out to me the other day, that whenever I go downstairs, whenever I say hi to any of them, I'm like, "Hey, how's it going? How was your day?" It's always very out there,
engaged.
Yeah.
And Americans are hi,
Yeah.
passing, and sure. I was doing a workshop for a group of Brazilians a number of years ago up in Midland, and one of the people was at the time a Dow Corning employee who had been in the United States for a number of years. And I did a segment where we contrasted values, and I said, here are 11 core American values and beliefs, and then the contrasting value would be this opposite view. He came up to me afterwards and said, until now I've never understood why I felt so comfortable in the United States, but on 10 of those 11 values I relate more in an American way to being here. And so, in fact, he to this day still lives and works in the United States. And so I think sometimes we're just maybe misborn, and there are other cultures and values that appeal to us more, our own personality. Marcos, what about you? Where is your comfort zone in all of this?
I think it's a mix. Because we have been in the United States for so long, there are definitely some aspects where now we feel more comfortable with the American style. But when I moved here, initially it was comfortable for me personally. We could see some differences, but at the time we were recently married, we didn't have children, so it was a lot easier for us to adapt. without having the concerns of running to school and lots of the activities we have to do every day.
And it sort of felt like just a big adventure.
Right. And of course we're learning so many new things. We're learning American culture and customs and learning how to ski, which is something we didn't have in Brazil.
Not so much snow in Brazil.
But there are some things, that even after going back to Brazil for the first time in 1 year and a half in the United States, we noticed right away the difference, one of the interesting differences of the space bubble. Brazilians, they have a lot of proximity. It's very common for Brazilians to, a person you just met, you shake your hands and hug them. It will be normal for women and men to kiss each other on the cheek. And this is something we don't do in the United States.
Americans are more Northern European.
Right.
Distance,
Yeah. There is no such thing as space bubble in Brazilian culture. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing that when we meet other Brazilians, we tend to be more close together and more hugging and more touching in types of this type of approach, more contact among the people. And
before I lived in Brazil, I was on an international flight actually coming back from Germany. And there was a group of very, in my American way of thinking, very noisy, very social group of people standing in the aisle and standing around the flight attendant station, talking and laughing and drinking. And later I learned as a large group of Brazilians all traveling together. And, you know, the Americans are all politely buckled into their own seats and just keeping their little space. And no, the Brazilians said, this is a party.
I think that's not unique to Brazilians, actually. I mean, Latin cultures in general, even Southern European, Italian and Spanish and Portuguese, they tend to be more, they demonstrate their feelings a bit closer, especially with family and friends, tends to be a lot closer.
Yeah.
But that was one of the big differences we noticed coming here. But nowadays, I think it's probably more comfortable for us, the American way, than the Brazilian one, in the sense when we go to Brazil, people may feel we are a little reserved initially, unless they know us, and then we're close. But for people who are just meeting for the first time, we may seem a bit more reserved than the average Brazilian.
Sure. Well, and some of it, not everyone has their own personal style matches exactly with the national culture. The national culture is an average, and some people are on the high end, some people at the low end.
Right.
But Thomas, I think it's really interesting. Just very recently, you have made a very conscious effort to immerse yourself more in Brazilian culture. You started doing capoeira. Can you tell us for our viewers, what is capoeira?
So Capoeira is a martial art that originated in really as far back as like 1600s, 1700s Brazil. The short story is basically that capoeira was invented by slaves who, were being taken over to Brazil, and looking for a way to escape, escape slavery. Obviously, they can't practice martial arts out in the open. They can't do all these things, so they invented capoeira as a way of disguising a martial art as a dance. Contemporary capoeira is actually very, very young. I believe it's less than 100 years old, the more contemporary style of it. Because right now, what it is, it's more of a social, traditional thing. Obviously it still can be used as a martial art, like when you go back to its roots. But especially our, the group here at Grand Valley, we practice like the more, expressive, like artful side of it.
So a kind of martial arts meets ballet, because it's very,
almost, yeah.
but it's athletic but flowing and artistic. But truly, to do it well, you have to be very strong and very skilled.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, if you look at like the history of how it was, like I said, it was invented by slaves, who were spending a lot of time, working physically. So they were very strong people, and it really is true. Like a lot of the things we do, it's a combination of martial arts, acrobatics, and dance. So while it's not one complete thing of each of those disciplines, it definitely involves, the flexibility of, dance and acrobatics, but still like the, like awareness of like your partner, like a martial art.
So what appeals to you most about capoeira?
Well, when I first joined it, when I became a freshman at Grand Valley, it was mostly the movement aspect. You know, you see these people doing like cartwheel and backflips under kicks and stuff. You know, you're pretty interested.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's true. But the more you know, the more I become involved in it over my course of or you know, all the time I've been into it at Grand Valley, you really learn that there's also, you know, it's really this unique culture and this really unique community that I don't think that is present necessarily in other martial arts or dance. Because, you know, if you think about it, it's a combination of martial arts, acrobatics, and dance, and then you have a mix of all those people coming into there. You know, like the class I have right now, we have Taekwondo black belts. You have we have people who have done gymnastics in the past. We have, you know, current like modern dance. We have a lot of modern dancers.
So they're bringing their various skill sets to this because they find some commonality there.
Yeah, and then you have these mix of different personalities too, because you know the same personality that's in, you know, maybe a Taekwondo group is not the same person that's also in like a modern dance group, and it's a really unique clash of like all these different people.
Awesome. And part of the tradition is playing the Berimbau.
Yes.
You have brought yours with you. Could you show us a little bit?
Yeah, it's
So tell us about the instrument.
So the instrument isn't actually just specific to capoeira. You know, in the way in the past, it was also used in like different kind of rituals, just having to do with like African origin. But right now in capoeira, the way it relates to that is that it's the central instrument that we use. Like when we do capoeira, we always do it in we call it a roda. It's just a circle that, you know, we all clap and sing, but we have, you know, people doing capoeira in the center. And the berimbau is just the driving force, so that's the driving force behind the music. It's a fairly simple instrument to learn because it's a string instrument, but at the same time, it's kind of classified as percussion. Yeah, it's not like a violin where necessarily we play like a whole symphony, but there's, you know, 3 basic notes. There's the high note, low note, and we call it the shui. It's just the rasp. And so everything, you know, there's various rhythms that we play, and those decide the pace of the game. And then all those rhythms are just based off of those 3 notes. So yeah,
could you please play some for us?
This rhythm is called Sambetu Grande de Angola. It's just the one that we typically use. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to thank both of you so much for coming and sharing your story with us today. Time's absolutely flown by, but we'll have to have you back another time. But in the meantime, we're glad to share the bit of capoeira and culture that you're picking up from your ancestral homeland.
Yeah.
And Marcos, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us as well.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Alan.
So the colored were actually a generation of people that were the offspring of a local African person and then some of the earlier settlers. And over those couple of 100 years, they created a generation of lightly skinned people that